Welcome to episode 2 of Outlaws Adventures in the Old West, and in this video we're going to look at some game mechanics. Outlaws uses a chip pull system, so each character has its own action counter. And at the beginning of each turn, each side places their action counters in their own chip pull cup. Okay, so on this side we have Scott and Tom, they go in there, and I've already put Lee and Robert in there. If using the optional rules for townsfolk, and here we have 2 townsfolk counters on the board, they have their own action counter as well. Now we put this into the cup of the team that has the fewest available actions. At the moment, because this game's just starting, we've got equal teams and all characters have 4 actions. So there's 8 on each side, so it's balanced. It would normally go into the side with the fewest, but as it's balanced we just use a dice to randomly determine. So if we have even here, it's even, so the townsfolk's going to go in there. Ready to start the game. To determine who draws first, it's the team with the most actions available. They obviously have an advantage. Again, in this situation, because we've got 2 balanced sides, they are the same. So again, for this one instance, we will roll a dice to determine. I should have said odd, even, odd. So this side will pull out their first counter first, pull out townsfolk. So the townsfolk will act first. Next, a character will be pulled from this cup, Lee, and then next from this cup, and back and forth. You have the option of passing at any point, and if your opponent immediately passes as well, that's the end of the turn. So it's a bit of a risky strategy, but sometimes if maybe you're heavily outnumbered or you're down to just one character, sometimes it's something worth considering. Just to run through the activation situation again, this time I've added a couple of wounds to characters. Tom has a leg raise, who's currently down by 1 action, and Lee has a chest hit, so he's down by 2 actions. So at the beginning of the turn, because there's still townsfolk on the board, we have the townsfolk counter to the side with the fewest actions available. So this in case will be Lee, because we've got 4 here, 2 there, so 6. So the townsfolk will go into there. We then add the normal action counters, and the team that pulls the first chit is the team with the highest number of actions. So over here this team's got 7, so they pull the first action. So first out the cup, this time will be Tom. Let's look at actions available. We've just pulled Tom's action counter. So Tom here is now the active character. Tom is unwounded and has 4 actions. Now the play aid lists all the actions available. We can see at the top there we have colour coded, so we've got the handgun actions, rifle, shotgun, knife actions, movement actions, hit the dirt, we go prone, leave cover, walk, turn around, open closed doors, get up, take cover, clamber over object, back off, walk and take cover, and climb through wood, and we've got run and crawl there as well. So all the different actions you can imagine he could do. Okay, so Tom's got 4 actions. I'm going to do some movement with him. Each move action allows a character to turn. So if Tom takes a walk action here, which costs him 1 of his action points, he can turn and move 1. He can get to the door here. To open a door, it costs 1 action as well. And to show that a door's open, because they're always considered closed in the game unless they are opened, we move Tom to touch the door. So that would cost Tom 2 actions so far. 1 to move there, 1 to open a door. He can step through the door for another action. And you can see that he also stays attached to the door. We also show him adjacent to the door. The door is going to be open unless Tom deliberately closes it or moves from the square. So he's spent 3 actions here, and that move allows him to turn, so he could turn and face Tom. Okay, still keeping the door open, and he could use his final action to either move to close the door or move towards Tom for his 4th action. If you wanted to move differently, we've got here he is again, so he has 4 actions available. It costs 1 action to move a square, but as you can see we have a printed object on the board here. And all the printed objects on the board are counted as either high or low objects. High objects are basically walls, cacti, rocks, and there's a tree on one of the maps as well. Everything else that printed on it is considered a low object. You know, think about waist height. For him to clamber over this, it's going to cost him 1 action to move there and another action to clamber over for 2 actions to get to the window. He could then turn as part of his move action, so that's cost him 2, 3, and he can turn again 4 and open the door. So that's some straightforward move actions. Let's consider now that Scott is an enemy. Okay, he's an opposing character that Tom wants to be able to take a shot at. In this case, just walking out into the open, even if you're not quite in front of Scott, doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense. So this time we're going to use some cover. Now how Tom can use the cover of this doorway here is he can move and he can turn and move for 1, open a door for 2, and then he can use the doorway as cover. To show that he's using the doorway as cover, we place him half and half in and out. So now he's getting a considerable amount of cover from this doorway. Okay, and that's cost him 1, 2, 3, and if he's armed with a handgun, he still has the option of taking a quick shot, a standard shoot action at Scott. The same things can happen with a window. If he's here, we can go 1, 2, 1 to enter the hex, 1 to cross over there, and he can turn. And then another action to lean out the window. When he leans out a window, you don't quite put it halfway, put most of the counter still inside the building because it shows you which way he's leaning in and which way he's leaning out. And then that's cost him, what did we say? That's 1, 2, that's 3. So we've still got another action which he could potentially take a shot at Scott. So they are different ways of moving. Another option he has is a run option. Now running is a good way of covering lots of ground, but it's the only action you can do for the turn. So if Tom runs, he cannot use cover, he cannot open doors, he cannot really do very much at all. So running inside the telegraph office doesn't make a lot of sense, but say he was, let's just move Scott at the moment, say he was here and he wanted to cover a lot of range. It's got 4 actions available, and each action he spends on running, he can move up to 2 squares, okay, and change direction. No point changing there, you'd have to carry on running. But it's a good way of covering lots of ground when you're in the open. Not really a lot of point when you're in a building. The other option you have is at any point you can drop prone. Okay, and if you hit the dirt, the action's called. It doesn't cost you anything to hit the dirt. Quite often, quite a good move to do at the end of a turn sometimes if you find yourself in the open. Also allows you to drop behind cover, such as benches and other objects printed on the board. And it makes you a little bit harder to hit. The only real drawback is that when you start your next turn, you have the option of crawling, which is change facing and move 1 square. Quite a slow way of getting anywhere. Or if you want to take a walk action, a move action, you need to stand up again. And standing up does cost you 1 action. They are the different move types available. The only other thing I want to show you is using corner cover here. If I move the board down a little bit so you can see. A character, when he comes to a corner, and again, if I put Scott back in place, let's move Scott up so you can see him. Say Scott's here walking away, so he wants to get a shot of Scott. Obviously you can move to this square here and turn. And hopefully if you took Scott down that would be fine, but then if Scott survives the roll or he misses or something happens, then he's going to find himself completely in the open. So the option of using the corner here. To use a corner, it takes 1 action and you move yourself to your 45 degrees to the corner. That means Tom can now see everyone down here and he can see Scott and he can take a shot at Scott, but he also gets a considerable amount of cover if for any reason Scott manages to fire back. The other move action I want to briefly look at is move and take cover, which you can do as a combined action. It actually costs, if you look on here, it's a combined action, it says here, get that into here, walk and take cover, combined action, and it's green colour code and it's got a 2 in there, so it costs 2 actions. The reason you might want to do this is in this situation here. Tom is moving towards Lee. At the moment, he's out of line of sight of them. Line of sight is traced using a straight line from the corner centre to centre of the hex. Okay, so it's a bit hard to see there, but it actually covers that corner cross here, so it's currently blocked. If Tom moved to here, he's now in full view of Lee and Lee could take a shot before he could then move to take the corner cover. So what you can do in fact is you can combine it and say I'm doing a move and take action, and it allows him to move into the next square directly into cover. In that case, he's sort of really creeping up along the wall here, is what we're saying. So Lee will not be able to see him until he appears at the corner. Okay, so Lee still might be able to take a snapshot at him, but this time Tom's going to have a lot more cover. Okay, let's have a look at what a character can see. Here's Lee, here on the board, And Lee has a field of vision which is effectively a 90-degree arc in front of him. So if you imagine Lee, then the next 3 squares here, then 5, and it expands. So basically you have this 90-degree field of vision. There is an optional rule. You can see the field of vision is shown on the chart here. There is an optional rule for allow you to have a 180-degree field of vision. Some characters like playing with that. That's a personal choice. I sometimes do and sometimes we don't. I haven't really decided on that one myself. But sometimes we use it and sometimes we don't. So in theory, Lee can see everything within that area. Now, of course, we have on the map here these objects printed. And as I said previously, these are high objects. So if the centre of Lee's square passes through any of these on the way to the centre of someone else's square, okay, if I put Scott over here, and I find my straight edge, here we go. Okay, centre to centre, it obviously passes through this outhouse, line of sight is blocked, and it's the same for the cacti and the same for the pile of rocks. Look at line of sight for windows. There's a window here separating these 2 characters. No character, a character can only see to the square just beyond the window. So at the moment, neither of these characters are in view of each other. If we move Lee to the window, here, he can now trace a line of sight from the centre of his hex through the window depiction to any hex that he can see. So from here he can see, just crosses the border, he can see Scott. So therefore Scott can see him and he can see Scott. Line of sight is normally reciprocal. And again it works the other way as well, so we place Lee in the building, Scott cannot see him, but if Scott comes to the window he can then use the centre of his square through the window to see Lee, and therefore a line of sight exists. Go back to look at windows in a little bit more detail. Here we have Lee at the window, so he can use the window to see, but at the moment, currently, from the centre of his square, he can only trace it through the depiction of the window. Therefore, he cannot see Scott. If he wants to use the window for cover, he has to use a lean out a window, which we said before, costs an action to do so.